John Dewey once said that if democracy begins in conversation, then we need to nurture a culture where ordinary people like us routinely talk about those things that help us understand each other, like some of the things happening right here on Bowen Island. This episode of the Bowen Island podcast is about the Snug Cove wastewater treatment plant. Not a very exciting topic unless you were building a new home expecting to be hooked up to it and were told you couldn't. Or perhaps worse, if you weren't a user of it, you had to pay for it anyway. In this episode, you'll hear from Tim Misko, Brad Hawthorn, and Nerys Poole as we look at the different ends of this elephant and try to understand how we got here, what the problem was, who's supposed to pay for it, and what we can do about it. So let's go back to the beginning with Tim Misko, who wrote one of the many letters, was published in the Undercurrent, and appeared before the previous council.
My discussion is not going to debate the actual need for the wastewater plant upgrade, though I understand there may be some questions in that regard as well. So with that said, bylaw number 10/2000, with most recent amendments occurring in 2019, establishes the Snug Cove Sewer septic area and makes crystal clear the intent and financial responsibility in Clause 2, where it states, the method of cost recovery for the service shall be by user fees and parcel taxes as defined by the bylaw to be recovered solely from the properties included in the area defined by Schedule A, the Snug Cove septic area. So, during the January 31st special meeting, Liam Edwards justified the approach of using unappropriated surplus and capital renewal and replacement funds by pointing to the 2010 precedent where the upgrades to the Snug Cove wastewater system were funded through the unappropriated surplus. However, after reviewing the minutes of April 6, 2010, I draw your attention to the following motion, which passed by council, that staff be authorized to engage a consultant to evaluate, recommend, and develop a program to recover the costs associated with expanded service capacity provided in the Snug Cove wastewater treatment plant upgrade from the lands that will benefit from the excess capacity. So referring to 2010 as a precedent that somehow gives authority to spend money as was proposed in the January 31st meeting is without grounds. There is no precedent to that. Also, during the January 31st special meeting, Councillor Hawking stated that Snug Cove is more than a local service area because we all use the shops, restaurants, pub, and so on. So it seems reasonable that we, the Greater Island, should pay to some degree. I'm not arguing for or against that point, but what I would say is if council does indeed believe that this to be the case, the bylaw establishing the Snug Cove sewer specific area and its documented funding formula needs to be amended, including with an amendment is of course the proper public consultation, review, and then that bylaw amendment needs to be duly enacted. It's not a unilateral decision made by municipal staff or council. Doing so negates entirely the process of governance outlined in the community charter.
Just so you don't think you missed something, that's exactly what happened. Here's my takeaway. In 2010, Council passed a resolution to take over $700,000 from the general fund that came from all taxpayers on Bowen in order to pay for the upgrade of the Snug Cove sewer system. At the same meeting, Council asked staff to engage a consultant to develop a program to ensure this amount of money was recovered. And so here we are in 2022, and all taxpayers are being asked to pay again. We caught up with Brad Hawthorn, who's a longtime Bowen resident and a former director of engineering for the Muni. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what's going on?
I mostly grew up in small mining towns in BC, so I'm very much a small town person. When I finished university at UBC in engineering, I traveled around the province a fair bit in small communities up and down the coast. And when it came time to settle down in my own life, I chose Bowen Island because I really felt that this was an amazing community and it had everything I wanted. I have a degree in civil engineering from UBC from 1993. So I've been doing engineering nonstop for almost 30 years now. When I moved to Bowen, I had expected to continue on my career in the consulting industry in municipal water and wastewater. And the municipality found out who I was when I was submitting my building permits and developing permits. And they had an opening for their municipal engineer and asked me to apply. I got to get in at sort of version 1.0. This was all groundbreaking stuff. And so it was a real challenge, and it probably took years off my life but it also kind of built my career. It was very, very challenging, very absorbing.
It sounds like a great opportunity. What year was this?
So I did that from 2003 to about, I can't remember, 2007, 2008, at which point I quit. I had enough of the stress and workload and not being able to separate myself personally from professionally within the community. It's a very difficult place to live and work in a public position.
You've been talking about the Snug Cove waste and water treatment decision for the past year, and you wrote the Ombudsperson. I wonder if you can talk to that.
So back when I started with the municipality in 2003, and initially I was the public works superintendent, which rolled into the director of engineering and operations as that role was created. So at that time, the municipality was just taking over the local service areas from the GVRD at the time, which is now Metro Vancouver. And there was a period between when the municipality was incorporated, I think in December of 1999 to 2001, where the municipality slowly took over some of these services and local service areas. And so as a result, I had to come up to speed very quickly with the local service area bylaws and the community charter and the local government act and how they related to those local service areas. And there was a process where the GVRD versions of the local service area or improvement district bylaws were sort of rewritten or modified into the municipal versions of those bylaws. So attending all those committee meetings late at night for, 6 or 7 water systems and 1 sewer system and a bunch of other stuff, I became very intimately knowledgeable with the legislation and also with the goals of the people on those committees as well, and their concerns about being brought under the umbrella of a municipality.
How so?
There was a lot of concern at that time that they would lose their autonomy and control over their water systems.
So connect the past and the present.
It was, I think, January 29th or 30th this year when a friend contacted me and said, Brad, you need to look at what's going on. I think this was the night before a very important council meeting on, I think it was January 31st of 2022. And so I read the minutes and saw what was going on. And generally what was going on that I became very concerned about was council deciding to do an upgrade to the sewage treatment plant using island-wide funds and basically to take money from specific and general reserve funds that the entire island had paid tax money into, which I knew right away was against the bylaws of the sewer system LSA and was against the community charter processes that had set up that establishment bylaw. And I really was taken aback by that. For a municipality that has all over its website reference to we follow the community charter, to go against its own bylaws and to go against the spirit of the community charter for local service areas really shocked me. And so I kind of took that to heart and went away and did some more reading and got more up to speed with what was going on. And I started to write a bunch of letters to council at that point. And my letters were very targeted at specific sections of the community charter and its own bylaws, explaining what they were violating and what the implications were of those. And one of the things that was being violated was also the trust in the community. When a municipality goes against the words of its own bylaws, that erodes the trust of the community and the people that vote here. So I felt an obligation because of my background and because I was uniquely positioned and educated to represent the interests of all of the homeowners on Bowen Island who didn't know how to approach this or didn't feel they had the ability to stand up to the municipality.
There were a lot of letters of support that followed your initial action. So clearly you got everybody's attention.
I used social media and Facebook to put the word out there. I think a lot of people just are not interested in reading council minutes and agendas and watching
pretty
that on
boring
YouTube.
stuff.
It is. It's pretty dry. And even reading the community charter, getting into it at first from the layperson, it's not fun. it reads like legalese, and you have to be very intimate and knowledgeable about how the different spheres of governments are laid out and how the different documents are laid out to get to where you need to be to find what you need to find in those documents. For me, it's easy.
But what I think you did really well is put that professional knowledge beside the community's emotional response to what they felt was right. What many of the community members that were here at the very beginning thought in terms of, understanding what the charter meant, that it's basically a use your pay system, and you really put a technical underpinning to what they're feeling, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not just a legal issue. It's a moral issue. So putting aside, what it says in the bylaws and the community charter, this community has operated its local service areas in a specific way. And we all agree that that's the way it's been done. And for some local service areas to be told, no, you have to fund yourself. And for this other one to be told, oh, yeah, no problem, we'll just get everyone else to pay for this. That was a moral issue, right? And I think a lot of people said, no, that's not right. And, regardless of the fact that, you spread that budget over 1,800 or 1,900 properties or whatever it was that now had to pay for that. And initially that worked out to something like $900 per property that we had contributed to these reserves. That's to some people, that's fine. We can absorb that if we have to. It's cheaper than hiring lawyers to fight. But for some people, that's not palatable. And different people are in different situations. And for some people, it's not just the homeowners. That cost can get passed on to the renters that don't have the ability to absorb that.
Can you talk about what happened when you contacted the BC government and what that process was like and what ultimately happened?
I had done all my reading at that point to satisfy myself that I knew what I was talking about with the current legislation in the Community Charter and Local Government Act. And I wanted to bounce that off of somebody who had a much better understanding than I did. So I phoned up the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and asked to speak to somebody, and I got a call back a couple of days later. And lo and behold, they were the funding officer for Bowen Island within the local government infrastructure and finance branch of the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. And we had a very long conversation about the community charter, and they were very knowledgeable about the specific sections. I think it's section 210 through 216 or 219 of the community charter, which covers how local service areas are established. And they are established in a very special way. It's not like noise bylaws or animal control bylaws where municipalities can just do those. Local service areas and their establishment are very tightly controlled within the Act, and very specific things have to happen. And so I wanted to make sure that my understanding of that was what the province's understanding of that was. And what I found from this conversation was, yes, my understanding was the province's understanding. When a local service area is proposed by a municipality or by members of the public who want a specific local service, they may want garbage collection that doesn't exist. They may want a water system that doesn't exist for their group of homeowners. So there is a process laid out where that local service is defined what it is. The boundaries of who gets that service are defined, and who pays for that service is also defined. And if people outside of that local service area who are not getting the service are also to fund or contribute, that also must be documented. So this then gets written into a bylaw, and everyone that's going to pay gets notified. And then there's a process where there can be counter petition. And based on the outcome of that, then the bylaw can be established. And once the bylaw is established, it states all those things. And then that serves the purpose of defining how that local service runs. And through that process, the boundaries of local service can get jogged in and out around properties of people that want to be excluded or people want to be included. But generally, when the rules of funding are baked into that establishment bylaw, that's the way it goes. Those are the people that agreed who's going to pay and who's going to get the service. So amending that bylaw afterwards without consultation in the same manner really just isn't right. it flies in the face of the community charter. So that was my main concern. Yeah, I had long conversations with this contact, and I then wrote to the municipality and said, hey, you should really talk to this person with the province, because I think they can really enlighten you about not only the community charter and the establishment bylaws, but